So if you are trying to get into fry screaming, you have probably seen a lot of YouTube tutorials at this point, like YouTube Shorts, for example, how to fry scream in 30 seconds. And spoiler alert, you cannot learn to fry scream in 30 seconds, obviously. It's a craft like playing an instrument, like painting or anything else. It takes time and it takes practice to get there. So most of those YouTube tutorials, especially the super short ones, are like you need two things to fry scream. One is the glottal stop, which is and the other one is like breathing on your glasses to clean them, like so your average YouTube tutorial guy is going to be like, those are the two things you need, bro. And you just combine them and then you can fry scream. So it's super easy, bro. You just go like, and there's your fry scream and you're done. Yeah, congratulations. Which is not how it works if you're starting out. So what I want to do is explain real quick why and are, at least in my opinion, not perfect places to start from when doing this sort of screaming, and I will try to explain how at least I'm doing my fry screams. But let's do some disclaimers first. And first thing is, everybody who does this has a slightly different approach, I feel like. So don't take what I'm telling you as gospel or anything. It's just the way I'm doing it. Subjectivity is implied in everything. And if you are asking 3 screaming guys for advice, you will get 10 different opinions, so take everything with a grain of salt. That being said, my style of screaming is, I feel like, more tailored to emo, punk rock, post-hardcore styles like that, where you're not necessarily going for the most brutal of screams. So if you're looking for a deathcore, death metal, slam metal tutorial, I'm probably not the guy to teach you that. I will briefly touch on voiced screaming versus voiceless screaming, which is more distorted later, but that's probably all that's in this tutorial for you. That would be the first thing. Second is, screaming is not supposed to hurt you. So if you are hurting your throat or any other part of your voice apparatus, stop what you're doing. It's normal to feel a bit hoarse or a bit scratchy when you're starting out. It's like building the calluses on your fingers while learning to play guitar, but nothing should hurt. Another thing is, you should not feel lightheaded when you're screaming. Feeling lightheaded or feeling some sort of vertigo means you are going way too hard. And speaking of going way too hard, nothing in your body should really tense up while you're doing this. Your throat should be relaxed. That's the most important thing. And the rest of your body should also not tense up. You are not squeezing out a tone like and it shouldn't feel like a workout for your upper body. It should feel more like singing, basically. But speaking of workout, there's at least one similarity between screaming and doing a workout, which is you have to warm up properly before starting. There's tons of YouTube videos on this. Just type in vocal warm-up 10 minutes, vocal warm-up 15 minutes. Sing along to those. It's way better for your vocal health to be properly warmed up before starting anything. You will sound better and it's going to be healthier and more sustainable. So the last disclaimer would be, sorry about the accent. As you've probably already noticed by the Schwarzenegger-esque pronunciation, I'm not a native speaker, but I am one of the Germans, so you have got to deal with it. Sorry, it is what it is. I didn't choose this. So with those disclaimers out of the way, let me start by explaining why and are, in my opinion at least, a bad place to start your fry scream. First thing would be which is basically compression in your throat, which has a point in fry screaming we will get to later. But if you're a beginner and you're hearing, you gotta go, what you're hearing is, okay, I gotta clamp my throat shut, so nothing can come through there, and I'm going to make the fry scream sound by pressing air through this sort of compression in a very forceful way. So you're gonna sound like and there's force, there's pressure building up in your throat, and it's not a good place to start because there's an inherent problem with too much pressure in your breathing apparatus, in your throat, etc. And the other thing is you cannot really project your scream this way. And projecting just means increasing the volume of your scream, increasing the energy of your scream. It's basically the same for the which will lock you into what's called a whisper scream right from the start. The foundation of a fry scream is your normal regular voice. It's not a whisper, which is what you're going to do inadvertently when you start by going and you can sort of turn this into a scream, which will be pretty quiet, but which will also lack energy. And if you're going to use something like this on a recording, you can layer it, you can put tons of effects on it to make it sound passable, but it's always going to lack the energy of somebody actually screaming. So an example of doing the whisper scream and the over compression in your throat, like the and the would be like, and you can make a distorted sound while pushing air or pressing air through your throat this way, but it's severely limited in what you can actually do with this compared to a more voiced fry scream, which I'm going to talk about next. So the way I learned how to scream was not by starting from the place of distortion, which is basically the approach, but by starting from applying your voice. So the first step I did was getting comfortable with yelling in my clean voice at a higher volume. It's like wah, 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 which is mainly a psychological thing, I think, just to make sure you are comfortable with the sound of your voice and the sound of your voice when you're yelling and when you're loud especially. There's discussion about how loud a fry scream should be. In my opinion, at least, it should be above your speaking volume for sure. It should not be you yelling at the top of your lungs, which is overdoing it, but the base of a scream should be you screaming, basically. Think maybe getting the attention of somebody on the other side of a street, for example. And you should, for this first step, just do it for a few days, basically. It's not like you're going to learn this in 30 seconds or be comfortable with your voice right away or anything. It takes time. Each of those steps takes time. So if you're comfortable doing this and being loud in your regular, normal, yelly voice without some sort of psychological block in your head, you can go on to the next step, which is adding twang. So you may be wondering why small children are crying all day and never get tired of it. And the answer is it's because they are using a form of twang, which makes your screams way more efficient, which is obviously what you're going for when you try to build stamina in your screaming, like going through a whole song or anything. So the way you are doing a twangy sound is by closing off your nostrils, basically, or at least that's what it feels like. You're going from wah, wah to This is a kind of sound you want to go for. Maybe you can go for a cat meowing, like meow, meow, which just have fun with it. I know it sounds stupid, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Try this for a few days, and then you're ready for the next step, which is where the magic happens by adding distortion to your voice. So what you're trying to do is going from to which is the most important step of a fry scream, but it's also the one that's the most mysterious kind of. There's a lot of squishy parts in your mouth, in your throat involved, and it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all solution for any of this. So from what I have learned, there's 2 to 3 ways to get this sort of distortion into your voice. So what you don't want to do at this point is doing the and just closing your throat to push in this kind of sound by force. So like I said, your throat should feel relaxed all the time, and you don't want to force this kind of distortion into your voice. It's something that happens naturally when you are hitting the right points. So how to hit the right points in your throat? Let's go with approach 1 first, which is trying to find the point where your voice cracks between your chest voice and your head voice. So you got a chest voice, which is your regular speaking voice, and you got a head voice, which is like going super high into this falsetto range. It's not anatomically correct to separate those two kind of voices, but it's, I think, the best way to conceptualize where you want to aim with your voice. So the first kind of approach to get this distortion going would be to play around with the pitch of a note you're singing and trying to aim between those two to a point where your voice becomes unstable. So you're going to go from this point where it's going like a car losing traction on a street is where you want to go. This is the foundation of the distortion you are aiming for. That's your starting point, which is one approach to get to the distortion. The other one is trying to hold a note, a clean note, with some projection, some power, some twang behind it, and taking away air from the note while trying to maintain the volume. So kind of choking out the note you're holding to get the distortion in there, or to get your voice to break in the way you want to go for a fry scream. So it would be like That's the second approach, and the third approach is a kind of a brute force method, which I would not really recommend, but which honestly helped me when I was just starting out, which is just going loud. So at a certain volume, your voice starts to distort way more easily than when doing it in a more controlled way. But it's also kind of risky to do this sort of thing, because you obviously are opening yourself up for injury or anything. So if you want to try this approach, take extra care. If you notice something hurts, if you're feeling lightheaded, stop what you're doing. So if you manage to get the distortion into your voice, which admittedly is the hardest part of this entire process for sure, you got the foundation down of everything else you are going to do moving forward. You can go to a lower scream from there, you can go to a higher scream from there, you can make all sorts of noises from this foundation on. It's all a matter of how you are going to modify your mid scream into higher or lower registers, how you are going to enunciate, how you are going to place your screams, how much you are going to compress it, and so on. But to be sure, all of this takes time. So you are not going to succeed in whatever you want to do at first. It all takes practice, it all takes time, but you will get better for sure if you just observe what you're doing, observe what is working, what is not working, and build up some sort of muscle memory while doing it a long time, which makes a lot of things easier going forward for sure. So the first thing you can do to change sort of the texture or the timbre, whatever you call it, of your voice is your placement. So what do we mean by talking about placement? It's also like the whole chest voice falsetto thing, not anatomically correct to say you place your scream in different places within your throat or your mouth, but this is what it feels like. So if you conceptualize your scream as if you are screaming from the front of your mouth, like your teeth, it gets higher immediately. Also, if you are opening your mouth a lot, your scream feels higher as well. So in context, this would be what it sounds like to go from a mid scream and without changing the pitch or anything to just opening your mouth and placing your scream at the back of your teeth. The same thing applies as well if you want to go lower, which is the opposite approach, like shutting your mouth more and placing your scream more in the back of your throat. Also, you can do all sorts of things with your tongue placement. So the idea with a low scream is to have a smaller room in your mouth where the sound is kind of tunneling through. So just by rolling your tongue and pushing it upwards, you can go from oh, to something like oh. That being said, another thing you can use to change the nature or the sound of your screams is play around with the sound of your voice beneath it. So like I said, you're not trying to go for as the base of your scream, but you're going for a note. Basically there's some voice beneath your scream. So if you go like ha, you would go like ha if you remove the distortion, not ha. So that also opens up the possibility to do stuff with the voice you got underneath your scream. So if you want to do like a goblin scream, not like I'm an expert on that or anything, but the point is you have to make your voice sound like a goblin first before adding distortion to it. So the voice in your goblin scream would not be ha ba ba ba, but it should be something like nyan 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 nyan. So you gotta play. It's a stupid example and I'm not good at it because I don't go for that type of scream, but to illustrate the point, I hope it's enough. The stuff you do with your voice underneath your scream is how you shape the sort of sound your scream is going to take on when you're adding distortion to it later. Speaking of distortion, the amount of distortion you're adding to your scream is another thing you can use to introduce more variation into your screams. So you can go on the spectrum from a super distorted scream that has almost none of your original voice in there to a barely distorted sort of scream that's almost like clean singing with a bit of rasp, but still coming from the shouting end of things. So examples of this would be like for a full-on voiceless scream, it would be something like oh! For like a happy medium, it would be something like oh! And for like a super voicey scream, it would be something like And to get to the last point, to circle back to the beginning, like a good tutorial is supposed to do, I guess. You can play around with the amount of compression in your voice, and you can control the airflow in your voice, which is getting reintroduced at a later point where you've got the foundation of your scream down to a point where you can use those tools in a way that improve your scream instead of limiting it, at least in my opinion. All of this is my opinion. Please keep your downvotes to a minimum. I don't know. So the way I'm using compression and this sort of airflow control is to kind of regulate the amount of distortion I'm using on my screams. So either of those things, be it compression or introducing more of an airflow instead of your voice, are adding more distortion to what you are doing. One thing is slightly pushing your throat closed. Don't overdo it. Don't choke out your voice. Is adding more distortion, which means you would go from to something that's sounding more like just by closing off your throat a bit more. You can also be a bit more efficient with what you're doing, and you don't have to scream like on the top of your lungs or anything. Just by adding a bit more compression, you can introduce more distortion at a lower volume and at a lower workload for your body, basically. But this sort of compression also influences the texture and the sound and the color kind of your scream. So yeah, play around with it a bit, find out if you like it, if you don't. If you're going for like a squeaky screamo type scream, you might want to go easy on the compression, so more of your natural emotional voice is coming through there. And if you are going for more of a deathcore or a metal sort of scream, you probably want to do a bit more of this sort of compression to make it sound more brutal, you know. So the other thing is introducing more of an airflow. So I'm not 100% on this. I'm still learning myself, so take this with a grain of salt. But at least in my opinion, what you're doing is you're using this sort of airflow, like the as in a whisper or in a breath, to replace some amount of your voice in your scream to go for a more voiced or a more voiceless fry scream. So by lowering your volume a bit and introducing sort of this breathy motion into what you are doing, you are going from which would kind of be the most amount of my own voice I can put into my screams, to something like just by changing the bass tone of your scream from to something like that. Like I said, I'm not 100% on this. I'm more on the screamo side of things with a lot of my own voice in my screams, which, at least in my opinion, makes them sound more unique, which is always a good thing. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. So that's about all I gotta say about this topic, I think. If you've made it this far, let me know what you think. And yeah. What a terrible way to wrap this up. I feel like I should have some sort of catchphrase or something, but I don't. Bye.